Welcome to Lean Agile Management Podcast, a show by Kanbanize that helps you boost work efficiency, create culture of high performance, and build teams that thrive. Welcome to the lab. Today on the show.
Don't use your own internal people to understand your own fitness. You need to really find out from the customer. That's going to build trust. It's going to help us understand in the future how to design our services, how to design our teams, how to design our organizations. But how much better to find out at the beginning than at the end when the contract's on the line or when people have been working really hard on the wrong thing or in the wrong way. Everybody's tempted this way to say, well, why don't you give it to me by Friday? In the absence of actually having performance data, and again, quantitative understanding of how we're performing, we're always going to rely on artificial or fake due dates or time constraints. Without having an understanding of what the customer values, they're going to find other metrics. A lot of times they're vanity metrics. The service delivery aspect of what we do matters just as much as the actual product. Well, now you're getting personal, Dima, but that's okay.
Our special guest today is Matt Phillip. Matt is the Director of Learning and Development at ThoughtWorks. He's a coach and trainer of lean and agile methods, a passionate advocate of quality, continuous learning, and fitness for purpose. Hi, Matt. Welcome on the show.
Hey, Dima. Hey, thanks. It's good to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. So maybe let's dive in straight into the main question for today. Go
Sure.
Battlefield. And if somebody asks you, what do you think is the biggest, hottest, most itching issue in modern teams and management, what would you say?
Wow. Well, I can't speak for everyone, but for me, it's certainly the thing that I'm thinking about and talking about these days is the idea of the service delivery review, which basically helps give us quantitative feedback on the performance of our service delivery. So I always talk about how we have great feedback methods for understanding the fitness of our product, even the fitness of our team internally. But how do we understand how we're doing with service delivery from our customers' vantage point? And so that's the big thing I'm talking about these days. It's on my mind that I see a lot in terms of a need with teams and organizations. So I don't know if that's widespread around the globe, but I've seen it a lot.
And how would we define it for people who have not heard much about it? How can we put it in simpler terms?
Sure. Yeah, I usually talk about elements of it being customer focused. So from a customer's angle, a quantitative feedback for understanding the fitness for purpose of our service delivery. So that is to say, what is the customer valuing about how we deliver the service? So, whether it's software delivery, restaurant business, most businesses are in the business of both product and service delivery. So it's not only what they're delivering, but how they're delivering it matters as well. And so I usually talk about those three things. So fitness for purpose of our service, the customer's vantage point or viewpoint on it, and some kind of quantitative understanding of it. So it's a feedback from those things.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like it's several kinds of feedback loops and better understanding of the why, right? Why behind our work.
Yeah, it really, and I picked this up from David Anderson from Lean Kanban. The idea of asking your customer, why have you chosen us? What do you value about the service we provide, or the particular aspects of it? And so, again, I think traditional Agile feedback loops, whether it's the showcase or demo, retrospective, automated tests, automated builds, those things give us feedback for other areas, but they're not giving us feedback for that very important thing that the customer is often chosen us for, is how we deliver things. And so asking the question, why? What do you value about our service? Why have you chosen us? And that gives us great feedback and starts us down the path for understanding how to measure those things.
Mm-hmm. Right. But then the things that customers would say, they would definitely help us understand it on the qualitative level, as you've mentioned. But then I guess we'll have to find a way to convert that then into more actionable kind of information, right?
Right. Yeah, that's right.
How do we go about that?
Yeah. So usually there's concepts that are fairly universal, whether it's speed of delivery, predictability of delivery, the throughput of delivery, how much do we get in a certain period of time. So those things are, in general, important to people, but they don't often know exactly what those thresholds are. They might know if it's too slow, or if it's too fast is a little bit stranger to think about. But even then, there's an upper threshold that we might think about. So I encourage teams and organizations to start somewhere, and then using the service delivery review, which is a periodic reflection and discussion about the state of the service delivery. Is this acceptable? And so, if we say yes, if you're delivering 85% of your work items within 10 days, for example, is that acceptable? Okay, that makes sense. Again, I use the restaurant metaphor. If you go to a restaurant, if you've gone to a fast food restaurant, you might choose them. Well, you will choose them because maybe not the quality of the food. The quality has to meet some baseline, I guess, depending on how hungry you are. But you've chosen them primarily because of the speed of the delivery and the service delivery. And so you as a customer, and only you as a customer, can define what makes their service fit for the purpose that you want it for. So is getting your meal within 10 minutes acceptable? If you get it within 5 minutes, would that be better? As opposed to going to another type of restaurant, a sit-down restaurant, where it's okay if you don't get served for 20 minutes, half an hour. Actually, you probably expect the food to take a little longer, because otherwise you'd question whether it was actually fresh made for you. Yeah. And so there's different trade-offs. There's different thresholds, if you will, high and low. But again, you don't often know exactly what those are at the outset, which is why the ongoing feedback loop is helpful to help you discover those things and get actually a finer sense of the threshold points.
Mm-hmm. Right. I got it now. But then are you saying that most people wouldn't, or many teams wouldn't actually understand the kind of expectations that customers are coming in with? Is that the main issue?
Yeah, I think I've seen it where teams are moving more to a flow-based delivery pattern. So whether they're working in hard fixed time boxes where all the cadences are highly coupled, or if they're moving into we'll deliver the stuff as soon as it's ready, and we'll work on stories, or if you're using user stories, we'll just continually work on them without these arbitrary endpoints like a sprint or iteration boundary. But I've seen that they don't often then take responsibility for giving feedback on the delivery of it. So people free themselves of these arbitrary distinctions of iteration bounds or sprint boundaries, but then they don't also give the customer a sense of how long it is taking them. So in a traditional sprint world, you at least have, and it's not always true, it's not always accurate, but you at least have some sense of the boundary of things taking 2 weeks to deliver. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't, but that's at least some sort of a common understanding with the customer and the delivery team. When you're moving into a more flow-based scenario, you still need to give that kind of feedback. And the beauty is that you can actually get much better feedback in terms of a distribution of how long each thing takes, because we know even in a sprint or iteration, things don't magically just get sized into the 2 week period and they just magically happen to take that long. So even then, there's things that are taking longer and shorter. And so being able to track delivery times is a really helpful way to express things like predictability and be able to see those things a little more accurately.
Mm-hmm. Okay. But would you say this is something that works better on a system level, or should we look at it on the team level? Is it compatible with both, or is it just for specific cases?
Yeah, I tend to think of it as scaling pretty well. Again, the idea of the Kanban lens. So if you look at your organization as an interrelated set of services, different people are providing services, whether it's internal functional groups like design services, for example. That's something that a lot of organizations use. Even human resources or management, internal operations services. We don't typically think of them as services, but these are all things that are happening in an organization in addition to providing actual services for customers or end customers or external customers. And so I think it's depending on what the service is. I think it's going to be, you can do a service delivery review to get feedback on the effectiveness and the performance of the service delivery. So it does scale, and I've even used it on a personal level in personal Kanban, which has given me some insights into how well I'm doing my own service delivery.
Okay. Would you maybe want to share a little more about that? Or
well, now you're getting personal, Dino, but that's okay. No, I'm happy to share. Actually, it's a very real life scenario. So, I keep track, and I use Kanban to do this. I basically categorize my personal work by cost of delay profiles. So I've got swim lanes that or expedite, the traditional ones that expedite, fixed date, which are things that have some kind of a due date, that are an actual due date, not a fake due date. And that's important. We can talk about that in a minute if you like. And then standard urgency things. And so basically, the other day, my wife was asking about something that I needed to have done that day. And rather than just say, "Oh, sure," which is usually what I do, I actually had just had my own personal service delivery review the day before, and I was able to say, I actually have a 90% chance of getting that item completed today. And so at the moment that was satisfactory for her. But in the days since, because I was getting feedback on my fixed date performance, I was able to pay a little more attention to that. And again, that's another benefit of the service delivery review, is it really focuses your improvement efforts from the mindset of the customer. What is the customer value about how you're doing? And so I'm happy to report, Dima, that in the ensuing couple of weeks, I've improved my due date performance to 96%. So anyway, I like to brag about it, but
Hashtag humble brag.
That's right.
Well, that's a good thing to be proud of, right? And to put it in simpler words, it's just to paraphrase, it's about thinking the people who get the result, the outcomes of your efforts, thinking about them as your customer, right?
Exactly right. Yeah, it really orients you to what's important to the customer. And a lot of times, I mentioned the retrospective as an important feedback loop. That's great, and we should keep doing retrospectives. The retrospectives give us feedback from our internal view of how we're working as a team or a group. Are we getting along? Are we pairing well? Are we engaged? Are we happy to be working in this environment? That's quite separate from the customer's concerns. Again, if I go to a restaurant, as a customer, I'm happy if the kitchen staff are enjoying working and they're happy in the kitchen. But ultimately, I care more about the performance in terms of what it means to me. Like, are they able to get my food to me when I expect it? Am I able to be seated in a proper time? And there's obviously a correlation or a relationship between internal fitness or internal health and the customer's expectations about fitness, but they're different things, and we need to have separate feedback loops for each of them.
Right. And you've mentioned the due dates, so maybe we can go into that for a little bit as well.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So, I think so. My claim is that in the absence of actually having performance data, and again, quantitative understanding of how we're performing, we're always going to rely on artificial or fake due dates or time constraints. So, even recently in my own organization, we made an internal request to our design folks, and we wanted something cleaned up, a presentation, just because we have zero design skill, my colleague and I, and so we wanted to turn to our experts. And so the email response was, well, do you have a deadline for this?
Right.
And so we didn't, and yet without any kind of understanding of how the service is performing, we're tempted, and I think everybody's tempted this way, to say, well, why don't you give it to me by Friday? So we create an artificial due date, and that's not helpful, because that actually can crowd out other possible economic outcomes, but it's also we might have a different service delivery expectation that's completely acceptable. But as long as we can know what that is, okay. So if that person had said, well, we have as long as this is not an expedite type of a rush job, which has its own implications and impact on delivery time. If they had said, for standard delivery items, we get those done within 2 weeks, 90% of the time, or 85% of the time, whatever threshold you want to look at. That would have been a useful planning method for us in terms of waiting for our work to get back to us. And so otherwise, like I said, we're left with a non-trusting scenario, and it's not a personal thing. It's just like in the absence of feedback or performance data about how the system's performing, how the service is performing, we're left to make those arbitrary things, and it happens with teams and sprints and iterations as well.
Mm-hmm. All right. Oh, you've mentioned some. So we've actually mentioned quite a few times now the performance data. So maybe could you just quickly explain what you mean there? Because it sounds like there is a danger of going to extreme micromanagement here. So
right, yeah.
On that kind of evaluations, or what exactly are we looking at?
Yeah, good point. So I would say, again, if we take a customer focus, it's what matters most to the customer. And so if the customer cares about micro level things, I haven't come across that where it's really how fast do you get stuff done? How can I do better planning? Again, how can I plan for any individual work item to be finished? How can I plan for a batch of work items to be finished? The next group of 30 user stories. When can I expect that? And this is supported by more probabilistic forecasting methods, which are give a probability at different ranges in the future. So instead of publishing a single number or saying we'll get to it in the sprint, or it'll take us 10 sprints to do this, we now have a much better sense of when things can be done and the probability that they would be done at each of these dates. So I think, again, having the conversation to begin with and say what is important, why have you chosen us, what do you value, that's gonna give us the most important data to look at, or at least put us down the right path without getting too lost in the weeds. Again, teams, I've seen this, without having an understanding of what the customer values, they're going to find other metrics. A lot of times they're vanity metrics, velocity, whatever it is, it's going to be something that the team is going to want to assess itself. Management is going to want to assess the team. Or the service, whatever it is. And so without properly connecting what makes them fit for their purpose from the customer standpoint, they're gonna optimize on other things that are probably not what's making them fit for their purpose. Mm-hmm. So not only are they wasting their time tracking data that's not useful, it could be misleading actually, and could be helping them become unfit for their purpose.
Right. Okay. So we've covered actually several concepts so far. It's been about metrics and service delivery metrics in the context of service delivery, and that it can be both on an organizational level and a personal level. But when we connect all of these things, what would be the things that a team that has not done this before, how do they make it all work? So what can we give an example of a successful team from how their process looks like?
Yeah, so that's good. So getting started, again, it's just as simple as getting the customer in the room or the customer in the conversation, asking. You can even do this at the beginning of the process. So whether you're working with external clients in the sales process, saying, why would you choose us? Why have you chosen us? Or even using it as a diagnostic for understanding why they haven't chosen you. Mm-hmm. That can help you build your service better. But very simply, just starting with the conversation. What do you value about our service? What makes our service fit for its purpose? And then I've used some example scenarios. Well, what if we delivered this in with this delivery time? If 85% of the time we deliver in 30 days or less, is that acceptable? Mm-hmm. Probably not. And so you can start getting scenarios. I've done one one way to do this also, it's kind of a fun way, is to write a sample Yelp review or like a Amazon review or some kind of a restaurant review, as if your service, as if your team were a restaurant. And so you have the customer as well as the team members, but people who represent the customer writing a review as if they've just gone to a restaurant and saying what they loved about the food, what they loved about the wait staff, how they were treated, and that can actually elicit interesting details about what the customer values, even things that the customer might not have even thought of or been conscious of to begin with. So that's a fun way to start it too.
Yeah, I really like this concept. It sounds fun, but also slightly dangerous if something goes wrong.
Yeah, that's good. So you mean like you discover something that was completely not on the table?
Yeah, I mean, if there is disconnect between the customer expectations and what we deliver, that can be quite a shock for somebody. But I guess
that's
an extreme case.
Yeah, that's a good point. But how much better to find out at the beginning than at the end when the contract's on the line or when people have been working really hard on the wrong thing or in the wrong way. It would be a shock to discover that. But I think that would be the point, is getting the shock earlier.
Yeah. But it sounds like a very, very clever way to approach this.
Yeah, it's fun. It brings out some of the creative side in people. Some people do, it's not that fun, but I'll just tell you what I value, and that's fine.
Yeah, but I guess for many people it would be interesting. I'm guessing, because it's not a typical business dry evaluation way of doing that. And speaking of ways to evaluate it and go around it, are there any frameworks or something that would help us go through the same process, like service delivery review, in a more structured way, or do we only write?
Yeah, so there's not a lot of stuff out there. I mean, like I said, I mentioned David Anderson before, and I know he's got a lot of good materials around all the different Kanban cadences. For me, I was trying to develop something that would be useful in the context of the organizations I've worked with, and so I developed a simple service delivery canvas. I know everybody's into canvases these days, but it was basically a way to help teams get started, a template, if you will, to understand what are the inputs we need to bring into the meeting, and then what are the things we come out with. And so I've experimented with different things with that, but understanding our performances at each of those, if you're using cost of delay or like I said, fixed date performance, expedite performance if you're using that, and then standard delivery performance. But also, there's no like set service delivery review format, but I found bringing in things like, if you're doing blocker clustering, that can be a good forum for that, because that's really helping you start solving problems with the system. So it's not only just presenting data, and again, the Canvas has the inputs, all of our performance data, a scatter plot, for example, of our recent performance. But also it gives you a sense of what are we going to do here. So it's not just a meeting for the sake of a meeting. Are these things acceptable? How can we improve things? What are the things we need to improve? And are there some options for in? And so it really tailors your meeting toward objectives, improvement objectives, but it also helps you stay aligned with the customer. Again, that someone from the customer needs to be a part of the meeting, and that's a key part of the service delivery, whether you're using a canvas or whatever, because only the customer can give you a sense of, are you fit for purpose?
Right. Yeah, and that sounds like exactly what Lean tries to promote on every level, thinking about the end value for the end customer. So yeah, I guess that's direct connection with that too.
Yeah. And again, I think, a lot of times the service delivery aspect of what we do matters just as much as the actual product, because we don't have a sense of, the product value a lot of times. But it's that relationship that we have delivering the service that's going to build trust. It's going to help us understand in the future how to design our services, how to design our teams, how to design our organizations, so that they're continually fit for the purpose. And so getting that feedback is absolutely vital. Otherwise, we're guessing.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, to almost wrap it up, I want to ask maybe two final questions, and they're quite similar. So, what would be the number one advice for teams that are getting started? So, one success tip, and what would be the one thing for sure not to do under no circumstance?
Oh, good questions. So one tip to get started. So I would say ask the question with the customer. Why have you chosen us? I know I've said that multiple times, but I think just that it's a simple question, and then iterating on that and getting feedback on it. So, what are the types of things that would allow us to know whether we're meeting those criteria, those fitness criteria? Um, so, asking the question, discovering your services. I mean, that's maybe like step zero, is knowing what business you're in. What kind of services do you provide? What does your customer think you're providing? Just aligning on those things is really a foundational thing before you start doing any kind of feedback loop. The thing not to do, I would say, don't use your own internal people to understand your own fitness. So it's kind of the flip side of that. You need to really find out from the customer. However you define customer, and you can define it broadly by saying it's whoever is consuming our service. So again, it could be an internal stakeholder, but understanding who the customer is and not using proxies. Because that can be misleading. It's kind of like the same pattern that we have with product as well. If you have someone who's not really ultimately responsible for the product, making decisions, you're always going to have some kind of a in-between layer of misinformation. And so finding out what makes you fit for your purpose with service delivery, it's the same pattern.
Right. That sounds like a great topic. And I really would like to thank you for joining us today for this conversation about service delivery review.
Yeah, thank you, Dima, and thank you for asking the personal questions. Next time I'll have to ask you some personal questions, I guess.
Yeah, we can make that the 10th episode, let's say.
Okay.
Well, it's been a pleasure to talk to you. Thanks a lot for your time, and we might see you here next time when you ask me questions.
I look forward to it. Thank you, Dima.
The Lamp is brought to you by Kanbanize, the leading Kanban software for lean management. Learn more at kanbanize.com. If you'd like to keep learning about the topics we've covered, there are some useful resources links in the description to this episode. Thanks for joining us, and see you here next time.